Welcome to our 614 Global Marketing. Today is our 6th session, and in today's session, we will be treating market entry modes and rules. Now, in our previous session, we looked at all the different thought processes that firms usually go through when they are selecting which market segments to enter into. So today, we are going to look at how the actual market entry is done in practice once they have decided which segments to choose. And on that basis, there are various entry modes that they can use and a number of rules that we can use to be able to determine how the firm is choosing to approach their market entry into the segments that they have decided to enter into. So based on that, there are certain learning outcomes we hope to achieve by the end of this session. The first one is to be able to identify and classify different market entry modes and strategies. And then the second one is to be able to explore different approaches to the choice of an entry mode. And then the third one is to be able to identify the factors to consider when choosing among global market entry modes. So generally, this is what we will be doing in today's session. So let's get into it, starting with a general understanding of global market entry modes. So when we talk about market entry mode, we are basically referring to an institutional arrangement that is necessary for the entry of a company's products or services, including technology, human and financial capital, into a foreign market. Now, you bear with me that in introducing products and services into the market, depending on the level of complexity involved and how the firm chooses to approach it, there may be the need for them to also plan the introduction of certain forms of technology, human and financial capital to facilitate the entry of these products and services into the markets. Hence, the inclusion of these factors in the explanation of a market entry mode. So when we talk about global market entry modes, there are three main types of modes that firms can use to enter global markets. The first one we can talk about is export modes. And then the second one is intermediate modes. And then the third one is hierarchical modes. Now, under each of these modes, there are subtypes that a firm can decide to use depending upon the various factors and firm characteristics that we talked about in yesterday's session, where we discussed the nature of the micro and macro environment, as well as the internal environment of the organization, and how these together predict which markets the firm decides to target. And it also goes on to predict which mode of entry they decide to use to enter these markets. So we are going to break down each of these modes, and then we will discuss some of the subtypes under each of them, starting from export modes. Now, before we do so, it is important that we appreciate the nature of these three types of entry modes that we have discussed along a continuum. Now, this continuum ranges from export modes being the one that has the least amount of control on the part of the domestic firm that is conducting the export. And it's also the one with the least amount of risk and the highest level of flexibility, given that 100% of the process is externalized, such that most of it, and in most cases, all of it, is not done by the firm, but is done by a third party on behalf of the firm. Hence, export modes are the ones that have the least control, the least risk, and the highest level of flexibility. However, in the middle of the continuum, we can talk about the intermediate modes, which usually play out in the form of contractual agreements. So they are also referred to as contractual modes. Now here we realize that unlike the export modes, the intermediate modes have more of shared control and risk between the manufacturer or the home firm that is exporting and their partner, who they are sharing the level of risk and control for exporting the product or service into the foreign market with. So in this case, we will see several instances of split ownership when we are discussing the different subtypes under intermediate modes, which are also referred to as contractual modes. Now, on the extreme of the continuum, which is the direct opposite of export modes, we have hierarchical modes, which involve 100% internalizing, meaning that almost everything, we can boldly say 100% of the entire process of moving the firm's products and service from the home country or the domestic market into the foreign market is handled solely by the exporting firm themselves. And because of this, it is also referred to as investment modes, because the firm has to invest a lot of its own resources and invest a lot of its own competencies and capabilities into the process of getting their product or service successfully into the foreign market. Hence, we are saying it's a 100% externalized process. And because the firm is all in terms of their own investment of resources and competencies, it has the highest amount of control. However, it is also the riskiest and the one with the least amount of flexibility, given that the firm does not have any wiggle room and is basically engaging in everything by themselves. So in discussing the entry modes, let's bear this in mind that we are discussing them along the continuum, starting from the least flexible all the way down to the most flexible. And we are looking at it in terms of the three types I talked about, which are the hierarchical modes, also referred to as the investment modes, intermediate modes, also referred to as contractual modes, and then export modes. So let's go into breaking each of them down one by one, starting from the export modes. So when we talk about export entry modes, we are referring to the fact that the products are manufactured in the domestic market or the home country, but they can also be manufactured in a third country. Given that we have talked about the fact that for the purposes of economies of scale, firms would often decide to situate certain aspects of their manufacturing or production or service delivery processes in different markets to be able to benefit from the conditions in these markets. And this is particularly evident in the transaction cost analysis approach to global marketing, where we realize that firms would usually conduct a transaction cost analysis to be able to determine the cost effectiveness of performing various tasks or activities in their value chain. So in the event that after this analysis, they realize it's more cost effective to manufacture their product in a third country, they will do so. Hence, when it comes to export modes, it refers to the manufacturer selling the product either manufactured in the domestic market or in a third market by transferring it directly or indirectly to the host market. So that is what export modes are about. So here we are talking about the fact that when it comes to exports, the firm can either do it directly or do it indirectly through certain intermediaries. And it is the most common for initial entry into international markets that is utilized by most firms, both large and small. So still on the issue of export modes, we can talk about the fact that most often the trigger for a firm to engage in export or utilize the export mode of entry is usually an unsolicited order from a foreign buyer. Now, most of the time, until firms receive such unsolicited orders, and we say unsolicited orders because the firm did not actively put in any effort into securing these orders from potential buyers. The buyers independently identified a need that they required satisfied and identified this particular domestic manufacturer or company as the best company whose product is poised to satisfy this need that they have. So unsolicited orders are usually the first point of call when firms decide to go into export, because it opens up their minds to the possibility of customers in other foreign markets being potentially interested in whatever product or service that they are selling. And these unsolicited orders give them a motive, often a reactive one, as we learned in the previous session, to embark on some form of global marketing activity or internationalization. So when these unsolicited orders happen, they prompt the firm to be able to think about the possibility of exporting their products and services to the foreign markets. And they will often go ahead to investigate the potential of their products and services in these markets. And in the event that they are not sure how this is going to turn out, assuming they do not know much about this foreign market, have some degree of knowledge, but not enough to be confident to be able to go all in, then they will choose a less risky approach to entering this market as a form of perhaps getting their feet wet, to be able to see if things will pan out before they engage in more high-level risk or commit more resources to these foreign markets that they have identified. Hence, the importance of export modes. So on the export modes, we can talk about three main types of exports. The first one being indirect export, the second one being direct export, and then the third one being cooperative export. So we'll take each of these one after the other, and then we will break them down, starting from indirect export. But before I move on, I hope everyone is okay and you understand what we have discussed so far.
Yes, Doc.
Yes, Prof.
Okay, all right. So let's continue by starting from indirect export as one of the types of export modes. So when we talk about indirect export, it is when the manufacturing firm does not take direct care of their exporting activities. So they would usually contract another company, which is also domestic, just like them. And this could be in the form of an export house or a trading company, both of whom specialize in dealing with buyers in foreign markets. And these are the people that they will entrust with the duty to perform their export activities on their behalf. Now, most of the time you realize that this indirect export will involve little to no effort or input or involvement on the part of the manufacturing firm in the domestic home country. The domestic company who is undertaking the export activity on behalf of the company would usually be the one to engage in all the transactions and discussions with the buyer in the foreign market up until the point that the sale is finally made. So we can say that in indirect exporting, the sale is like a domestic sale because the firm is not really engaging in global marketing, given that they are not the ones directly engaging with the buyer in the foreign market. It is the exporting company or export house or trading company who are actually the ones carrying their products from the domestic market abroad. So they do not actively engage with the buyer in the foreign market, hence the name indirect export. So with indirect export, these organizations or companies in the domestic market who will engage in this export activity on behalf of the manufacturer or seller of the products can be put into so many categories. But for today's session, we will discuss three of them. The first one being export buying agents, the second one being export management companies, and then the third one being those who take advantage of piggybacking, right? So let's start by explaining export buying agents. So an export buying agent is usually a representative of foreign buyers who lives in the exporter's home country. So like we said, both the exporting company and the manufacturing company are all domestic companies that are in the same geographic location. So this export buying agent is the one who operates on the basis of the orders that they receive from the buyers. By dealing with the buyers and ascertaining what their needs are, and then communicating these needs to the manufacturer in the home market, and then getting the products and making sure that they put in place the necessary arrangements to have these products shipped directly to the buyers. Now, the agent does not receive anything from the buyers in this regard. However, they receive a commission from the manufacturing company, who in this case is the exporter, for their effort in being able to solicit orders from these buyers in the foreign market and getting these orders filled by the manufacturer. So in this case, the manufacturer is not directly involved in determining the terms of the purchase. All of this is agreed upon and negotiated between the buying agent and the buyer in the foreign market, right? So the exporting company or the manufacturer almost never gets into contact with the buyer in the foreign market. Everything is handled by the buying agent, who ultimately earns a commission for the work that they put in. Now, the next type we can talk about is an export management company. Yes, Kwesi B.
But Doc, I was just wondering that, so what if it's a service and not a product, does the same thing apply?
To a large extent, but this is usually in the case of a product. Because again, with the services or with services, the characteristics are different from a product. You know, services are sold and consumed at the same time.
Yeah.
So there is no way that a service can be sold overseas without the involvement and interaction between the service deliverer and the buyer.
Yes.
So I think the export buying agent one is largely for physical products and not
products.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, Gracie. All right. So moving on, we are talking about the export management company. And these are specialist companies that are set up to act as the exports department for a range of non-competing companies. So they are set up such that they are like a whole exports department in a company that has fully internalized its global marketing activity. And because they are set up as an export department, they can undertake each and every aspect of the export activity from start to finish, depending on the level of involvement that their clients, who are the exporting companies, want them to have. So their knowledge of the local purchasing practices in these foreign markets, as well as their knowledge of the government regulations, and we can also say the macro environment and micro environment in these foreign markets, becomes particularly useful, especially where these exporting companies in the home market are finding it difficult to penetrate some of these foreign markets that they want to enter into. The best bet is to get in touch with an export management company that specializes in this kind of activity, to use their range of experience to facilitate your entry as a domestic company into these foreign markets. So an export management company can be either local or foreign owned, right? And because of the range of activities that they do in terms of export, they can either operate on a commission basis as simply an agent, just facilitating the movement of the product from the exporter to the buyer and then earning their commission. Or they can be retained by these companies as consultants to consult on behalf of the company in all its export activities. And in that case, they will not be earning a commission, but they will be retained on a fee basis. Whereas in other cases, they could act as direct distributors and take possession of the goods from the domestic manufacturer and sell them directly to the foreign buyer in the market. So this exemplifies what we talked about in the sense that an export management company can do it all, including what the exports agent does, in addition to other things involved in the entire process of conducting export activity. Tara, please come in.
Okay, could you please elaborate a bit on the final point you made about the export management company, where they could take possession of the goods for direct export?
Okay.
Yes, because what I understand is that if they were operating as an agent, they would earn a commission on the transaction.
Yeah, but they do not own the goods.
Exactly.
So they are not responsible for what happens to the goods in transit or whatever.
Yes.
Good.
Okay. They're just facilitating.
They're just facilitating.
The
but when
process.
it comes to taking possession, they actually buy and own the product.
They buy it. Okay, so they could buy it at X amount and then decide to sell it for Z, and whatever profit they make on it, that's for them. So the relationship between the manufacturer and the export management company will pretty much end once the manufacturer sells those products to the export management company.
Exactly.
Then, wonderful. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Tara. Yakubu, please go ahead.
Doc, the export management company, can we also term them as middlemen?
It's one of the hats that they wear, yes. They can act as middlemen.
Okay, because they will receive the export goods,
yes,
and then facilitate it to traders in the local market to sell it out for them.
Yes, please.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome,
but Doc,
Yakubu. Yes, Kwesi.
But if the manufacturer would like to have control over the cost of the product, and he's giving the cost of the product to an exporter who would receive the goods and then determine the cost that he would want, I think that it might bring a problem there, because.
No, Kwesi, come again.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, if the manufacturer, let's say, has pegged its price at 10 cedis per product, and then the exporter who receives the goods and gives the goods is selling it at 25 cedis.
Yes.
Based on the countries that they are and the different locations, don't you think that there'll be a price imbalance throughout?
So at that point, The manufacturer is out of the picture.
So he has no say at all?
He has no say. He has sold the goods to the export management company. Okay. So whatever happens from then on, it's about the export management company and how they decide to handle the goods that they have bought and now own. So how they decide to sell it in the different markets based on exchange rates and everything has nothing to do with the manufacturer. The only dealings the manufacturer had with the export management company is that these are the people, the only people that we sell our goods to.
Okay.
Good. So it's like a standing agreement between them.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
You're welcome, Tracy. Okay. So aside from the export management company, the firm could also go for the piggybacking approach. So the piggybacking approach is basically what it is, where they actually use another organization that is already established in terms of selling their products and services in the foreign market. And then you use this organization's network and links to be able to get their product or service into this market. So we say it occurs when one producer who is the carrier, so the one who is usually doing the carrying, who already operates in some foreign markets and has some experience selling in these markets and dealing with regulation and customer demands in these markets, serves as the carrier for another export inexperienced firm who is called the rider, who will use all this experience that they have gained over the years as their stepping stone to enter this foreign market. So it enables the rider, like I said, to fully utilize all the carriers' established export facilities in this foreign market to be able to make their movement into this market smooth. And this usually happens when the firm adopts one of the interaction approach to internationalization. Please, do you remember when we talked about the interaction approach? Do we remember? Theories of internationalization. Remember we talked about the stages approach, contingency approach, and then the interaction approach. Please, do you remember?
Yes, now that you've put it under those three, yes.
Yes, right? And under the interaction approach, we talked about a specific kind of model. Which model was that?
The network model.
The network model, right? So here they are using the network of the carrier. Nigel, these products will usually be complements and not similar, because if they are similar, it will be direct competition. And in that case, the piggybacking will not happen because nobody will piggyback somebody to become their direct competitor. So it's usually for complementary products and services. Right, Yakubu, please come in.
All right, so Doc, if I get this piggybacking thing, all right.
Yes.
If a new company that is entering into a new market,
yes,
without much experience on that market,
yes, please,
could get an already existing business in there and partner with the person to sell the product on his behalf for them.
Yes, please.
Okay.
That's piggybacking.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. All right, so like I mentioned in terms of what Nigel was asking, this is usually done with complementary goods because you cannot have goods that are in direct competition with each other being exported to a foreign market using the piggybacking approach. The carrier would never agree to give room to a rider who is in direct competition with them, right? So in doing this, the carrier would agree to facilitate the rider's entry into this foreign market, either for a commission or they would have a standing agreement with this rider where they would buy the rider's product outright and then take ownership of it and then sell it as a complement to their products by being an independent distributor for this rider's products in that foreign market. Right? So you realize that a lot of the companies who usually thrive in terms of this approach of piggybacking include those who are selling complementary products, like those who sell electronics and then the accessories that go with these electronics. Please, am I making sense?
Yes. So for example, a cell phone company would sell headphones and maybe a wireless mouse or an additional screen.
And then the accessories, the phone covers, the screen protectors,
car chargers.
Good, all those things, right?
All right.
That's a typical example of complementary products that will usually go together. Another good example we can give are the gaming consoles and the games. You realize that those who design the gaming consoles do not really bother themselves with the games or how they are designed or how they are produced, but there are people who also specialize in producing the games. So you notice that based on the level of agreement, some game manufacturing companies piggyback the product of some of these game console manufacturers. So you see that some of the consoles come pre-programmed with some of these games. Please, yes. Am I making sense? Good.
Yes.
Good.
And then sometimes you could even get a free game with a purchase of a console.
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay.
Great. Mariaba says, I want to find out if someone buys shea butter from me and is supposed to be sold in UK, is it piggyback? Does the person have a shop in the UK, Mariaba, from which they've been selling items?
I think so.
Okay, then it's piggybacking.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mary. All right, so that is for the piggybacking approach under the indirect export mode. Now, the next one we are going to talk about is the direct export, still under export modes. And here it occurs when a manufacturer sells directly to a contact in the foreign market and they do not go through any intermediary. So here you realize that exporters who, after working with all these indirect export intermediaries through the piggybacking and the export management companies and then the export agents, gain more confidence and get more knowledge about the markets that they are selling to. And then at some point, they will decide that, okay, now they know enough to be able to undertake the exporting task on their own. And that is where direct export comes in. So here, they would usually use their relationships in the indirect export phase to be able to build overseas contacts and then do a lot of marketing research to be able to understand the marketing conditions in these markets, as well as be able to understand the micro and macro environment. And then they'll also want to understand in that regard how documentation regarding the export of these products to these markets is handled, as well as transportation, and how marketing mix strategies are designed to be able to sell these products to customers in these foreign markets. So by the time they are done, they will have enough knowledge about the market to be able to export directly to agents who are based in these foreign markets, or get into contact with and get agreements with distributors who are based in these foreign markets. And they will begin to sell their products directly to these distributors and foreign-based agents who will distribute it to customers in these markets without using other intermediaries, particularly in their own domestic country. So with indirect export, just like that, yes, Yakubu, please come in.
Okay, so with the direct export,
yes, please,
as compared to the indirect, yes, as you stated that the exporter actually do not involve himself in the buying agreements and other stuff.
Yes, please.
But with the direct export, the manufacturer deals with the agents or the distributors direct and negotiate, yes, prices and other things.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Right. So just like the indirect and the direct exports, there are other types which the firm can utilize. The first one being getting distributors or importers directly in the foreign market. So these are people who are exclusive representatives of their company, and they will generally be the sole importers of the company's product in their markets, right? So unlike the agents we talked about earlier in indirect export, these distributors in the foreign market would buy the goods from the manufacturer and take title to the goods. They will finance the inventories and bear every risk involved in the operations of receiving the goods and selling it in the foreign markets, right? Which we know from our previous discussion regarding the agents that they do not. So you see this happening a lot, particularly in countries like Ghana. You will hear sole distributor of so-and-so product, sole distributor of so-and-so product. And that is because they have a standing agreement with the manufacturer that they will be the only ones who will exclusively represent the brand of the manufacturer in the foreign market, right? So in this case, the distributors are free to set their own conditions of sale, given that they buy the product from the manufacturer and take ownership of it. So they can set their own conditions of the sale. They decide how to market the product, how to promote it. They even decide what price to charge for it, right? How much profits they want to earn on it. All of these are unilaterally decided by the distributor. And you realize that most of the time, the distributors will often operate a wholesale, where they would also give out to independent retailers in the foreign market for sale. And they will also have their own retail establishments, where they will be selling directly to consumers as well. And then they will also have warehouses and repair and service facilities in the foreign market. Because they are the sole distributor, if anything happens to the product in that market, they bear responsibility for it, right? So a typical example is I2 in Ghana for Samsung. Please, have you heard of I2?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so for a very long time, I2 was the sole distributor of Samsung in Ghana before the other companies came in. So I2 had their own warehouses from where they were distributing the Samsung devices, and they had their own repair and service facilities where you could go and have your Samsung devices repaired in case there was a problem with any of them. And they were also giving out at wholesale prices to other retailers to sell, and at the same time had their own retail establishment as well. I think their office is in Spintex. I don't know if they are still there. So for a very long time, I remember the business school even needed to source some Samsung devices for our then mobile lab. It was I2 who helped the business school get those devices, right? So that's a typical example of distributors. Does anyone have an example of a sole distributor of a product in Ghana, which is from a foreign location?
Yeah, I think Eversheen cocoa butter.
Great. Who is the sole distributor in Ghana?
I know the people, but the company name, I'm not so sure.
Escaped you. Okay.
Maybe I can get it in.
Sure. Thank you, Mary. Sarah, please go ahead.
Would Silver Star and Mechanical Lloyd would be examples of the distributors for Mercedes-Benz and BMW in Ghana?
Yes, please. I think
because
so.
they do the service and
Yes,
and they give the parts and all of that. Okay.
Yes, please. Yes,
Thank
please.
you.
Very good example. You're welcome, Tara. Kafi, did you have something to say?
I was just thinking of Sumo Vision and LG products.
Okay, that's another good one. Yeah. Abu Nawas, you said Cologne, Ghana. Please, what are they the sole distributors of? If you could kindly share. Nawas. Okay, Nawas, please, when you get the chance, kindly share with us what they distribute. All right. Okay, yes, Yao Mensa, please go ahead.
Thank you, Doc. What are the dangers of exclusivity, and how much that can they cover? How much can the advantages cover such dangers? I'm asking this because I have a distributor for myself in the country who has been pushing for exclusivity.
Yes, please.
Which is just like a sole distributor.
Yes, please.
And I'm kind of skeptical to give him that exclusivity. What are the dangers peculiarly to Ghana?
It depends on the terms of your agreement. Some agreements are ironclad, such that if you make this person your sole distributor, and I presume they take ownership of the product, or?
For now, I'm giving CAD, cash against documents.
Okay, so in that case, you still hold some power to be able to determine other aspects of how the product is promoted and sold. However, in the event that the promotion of the products
the pricing of the product to the mine is done by him.
Okay.
But he hasn't got exclusivity. I could wake up the next day and decide to give it to another person.
Yeah, but who promotes it?
It's a global brand, so he doesn't need to promote.
Okay, so the parent company is doing the promotion already. All right.
Yes, please.
Now, the problem with exclusivity is that if the person does not have an extensive enough network to guarantee you a large amount of distribution, to enable you move large amounts of product, giving them exclusivity is defeatist. Because it means that you are giving exclusivity to someone who may not be able to sell as much of your product as you would like. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
It does.
Good. So unless the person has nationwide coverage, several retail locations, several wholesale locations in which they are stocking your item and you know that it is reaching almost everybody in the country, then when you're signing exclusivity, you'll be confident. But in the event that this person does not have that much of a large network, you would want to keep some of the control to yourself, like you're currently doing, so that in the event that another distributor comes who has another sizable network that you can benefit from, you'll be free to do so. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
A lot.
Good. So it's about just hedging and not putting all your eggs in one basket, especially where you are not confident that this person that you are is demanding for full distributorship can actually give you the amount of sales that you are looking for. So if this person does not have that much coverage, I'll advise you to keep it as is, and then you'll be free to sign on other distributors who have a sizable amount of coverage that you can benefit from.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Yao. Okay, so Abunawa says Cologne Ghana distributes the following drugs. Okay, Cushion capsules, Arababa, Zen pills. Oh, wow. So it's a herbal. Okay, I get it. Elizabeth says Rana Motors for Kia. Great. That's another good one. All right, so these are all examples of the distributor relationship and the direct exports that we talked about. Now, aside that, we can also talk about foreign-based agents. Now, these are independent companies that sell to customers on behalf of the manufacturer. So usually these agents will not see or stock the product, unlike the distributors who will actually go ahead and see the product, pay for it, take ownership of it and stock it. Agents will usually not see or stock it. They will just act as go-betweens, just like what the export agents in the domestic market will do. Only in this case, these agents live in the foreign markets that the exporter is exporting to. So they just act as a go-between for the exporting company and the wholesalers or retailers in the foreign market who are interested in importing the product or service. In that case, all inquiries and offers are received by this agent in the foreign market and then forwarded to the manufacturer, who can either reject or accept the requests that have been made by the buyers in the foreign markets. So the exporter will ship the merchandise directly to the customers and not to the foreign-based agent, right? And all arrangements on financing, billing, credit, etc. are made between the exporter and the buyers. So the foreign-based agent is just a go-between between the exporter and the buyer. All transactions are handled between the exporter and the buyer. He is just a go-between who makes sure that they establish contact with each other and are able to communicate. So on that basis, this particular agent can either be exclusive or semi-exclusive. Exclusive in the sense that they only serve this particular exporter. Whereas semi-exclusivity means they can serve a number of exporters who are exporting from different domestic markets into this agent's foreign market. Right? And they are used very extensively when it comes to firms in domestic markets who are trying to break into foreign markets. And these foreign agents will usually earn a commission, which is typically between 5 to 10%, which is paid by the manufacturer, or in this case, the exporter in the domestic market on a pre-agreed basis. Priscilla, please go ahead. Priscilla, your hand is up, or it was a mistake?
Sorry, Doc, my device is misbehaving, sorry.
All right, okay. So aside the sales subsidiary, aside the, foreign-based agent and the distributor, the sales subsidiary is the highest form of direct export, where the firm has amassed enough knowledge and experience about the foreign market such that they have identified the potential of the foreign market to the extent where they do not believe it will be effective to serve that market with a distributor or foreign-based agent. And as such, given that the market is so attractive and sizable, and the amount of exports that is going into this market is fairly large, they would want to be able to get a closer amount of supervision over the processes involved in getting their product and service to these buyers in the foreign market, as well as how the sales and marketing and promotion of these products are done to the buyers in the foreign market. So they will ultimately establish their own sales office, right? Which is for organizations that wish to be a bit modest. Whereas for those organizations who want to go all out, will establish a whole sales subsidiary to be able to handle all distributional and promotional responsibilities in that market. So in this case, the company is not dealing with any third party. They are handling everything themselves by setting up their own sales office or sales subsidiary to deal with the promotion and sale of their products or service in the foreign market to the buyers in that market, right? So these are the three main types of direct export that we can talk about. Yakubu, please go ahead.
So, docs, on the sales subsidiaries,
yes,
can we mention CFO, who are into Renault manufacturing and they are here distributing their own products here?
Excellent example, Yakubu. So it's their own subsidiary. They own it, yes, and they run it. Yes, please. So Yakubu, that's a perfect example.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. All right.
And
yes,
sorry, this is Sarah.
Yeah.
Quick question. So in the same sense, would Volkswagen also be similar?
Yes.
A good example?
Volkswagen wouldn't be a sales subsidiary because they have a whole manufacturing plant, right?
Okay.
So
okay,
they will be more like Greenfield, which we will discuss very soon. So they are not sales subsidiary. They have actually set up a whole plant and are manufacturing for sale.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that is it for direct export and then the sub types of direct export. Now, another type of export we can talk about is cooperative export. And this type of export is very popular among Ghanaian exporting firms, particularly the SMEs, who like to go through state-facilitated institutions like the Ghana Export Promotion Company. So when we talk about cooperative export, it involves collaborative agreements with other firms concerning the performance of exporting functions, right? So because it's a cooperative agreement, it is also referred to as the process of using export marketing groups. And like I mentioned, these are often used by SMEs who are attempting to enter foreign markets for the first time. And based on the characteristics of SMEs, we know do not have the resources and the competencies required to be able to successfully enter these foreign markets on their own. So they would usually go for these export marketing groups as a means of getting to enter these foreign markets. So by cooperating, they are generally able to achieve higher economies of scale in terms of the performance of various value chain activities, right? And when they come together, they are able to pull together their resources and competencies to be able to conduct research on these foreign markets and be able to obtain better representation in these markets. Like I said, in Ghana here, a lot of this cooperative exporting is done in partnership with the Ghana Export Promotion Company, which puts them into contact with various organizations and institutions in foreign markets that help them to be able to realize more stable prices for the products that they export, as well as achieve reduced selling costs, which can be able to help them get higher returns on the items that they export to these foreign markets. So cooperative export is another example of export mode that firms can use. And with that, we've come to the end of the discussion on export modes of entry, which we mentioned are the highest in terms of flexibility, right? And they are also what? We said they are the most flexible. What did we say about them when we're looking at the continuum? This continuum, I mean. Yes, Tara. Tara, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I was going to say that they were 100% externalizing.
Good.
That's what I was going to say.
Good. So that means that you have a very limited amount of control. However, the risk involved is very low, right? And it's also very flexible, especially for firms who do not have the muscle power to be able to go all in on international marketing activity from the outset, right? So the next level we have is the intermediate entry modes, which we also refer to as the contractual modes. So by virtue of their name, we can surmise that they involve a lot of contracts. So in terms of intermediate modes, these modes are necessary because sometimes the firm may find it either impossible or undesirable to supply foreign markets from a domestic or third country production. So they cannot manufacture in the home country and sell it to the foreign markets. And they cannot also manufacture elsewhere and sell it to the foreign markets. So with intermediate entry modes, they are distinguished from export modes such that the intermediate modes are basically vehicles for the transfer of knowledge and skills between partners. So rather than manufacturing it themselves, they will transfer the knowledge that they have in manufacturing the product to a partner in the foreign market who will manufacture and sell, sometimes with their name, in order to be able to sell the products in the foreign markets, right? And again, intermediate modes are distinguished from hierarchical entry modes, which we'll talk about very soon, in that there is no full ownership by the parent firm involved. This usually is made up of contractual agreements between the firms, one in the home country and the other one in the foreign country, right? Where they agree on the degree of ownership and control between themselves regarding the skills and the knowledge that have been transferred from the domestic manufacturer to the foreign manufacturer to be able to ensure that the domestic manufacturer's product gets manufactured and sold in the foreign market. So when we talk about intermediate modes, again, like the export modes, there are different forms of intermediate modes, including licensing, franchising, contract manufacturing, and joint ventures, which we are going to talk about. So the first one is licensing. And licensing is a contractual agreement whereby one company, which is referred to as the licensor, makes a legally protected asset available to another company, which is the licensee, in exchange for royalties, license fees, or some other form of compensation. So this protected asset that is often made available to the licensee could be perhaps a brand name, a company name, a patent, some kind of trade secret, or a product formulation, which the manufacturer in the foreign market may not have access to on their own. So they will have to rely on that of the licensor to be able to manufacture and sell this product or service in this market. And we realize that Lego is one of the companies that has mastered the art of licensing. They have a Lego toy set for most of the major global brands that we know of, particularly in entertainment. So they have a Lego set for almost every major blockbuster Hollywood movie that we can think about, including the entire Harry Potter series, including Star Wars. More recently, they even have it for the Avengers, right? So we realize that for companies like Lego and Disney, they are able to generate huge amounts of revenue through the process of obtaining these licensing deals. Because these franchises that we are talking about, they are able to obtain the license to use the names, the symbols, and the figures in these various global licensed entertainment figures or movies or individuals, right? Mattel has benefited a lot from this. Please, do we all know Mattel? Mattel is the company that manufactures the Barbie dolls. Have you heard about them?
Yes.
I was just thinking about them.
Yeah. And Mattel has made a Barbie replica of almost every female celebrity in Hollywood we can think about, right? As a result of licensing. And for companies like Disney, they've been benefiting from licensing for so many years, where the characters from all their animations and movies are being used in everything from clothing to toys to footwear to fragrances, right? You name it. Yes, Elizabeth, Hannah Montana. There's Hannah Montana school bags, Hannah Montana pencils, pencil cases, pens, color pencils, dresses, hats, you name it, right? So Disney is one of the foremost companies in the world that has been able to harness this aspect of intermediate market entry to their advantage, right? Such that by licensing the brand names as well as other assets of their myriad entertainment figures to manufacturers in various countries, they have been able to create a wide network, which is manufacturing and distributing their products and services in various markets and is directly earning them revenue by the minute, if I dare say so myself, right? So we see a lot of these collaborations going on around. And with licensing, depending on how strong the asset you are licensing is, it can offer a very attractive return on investment for you during the lifetime of this licensing agreement. Shanice, please go ahead.
Hi, Doc. Good evening. So, I'm trying to understand. So, who does the license? So they will license their products such that I'm just trying to understand how they make the money. So, if you want to come and use their name or their product, you pay them, or who does the license? Who makes the most money out of it? So, Disney has licensed.
Disney is the one who makes the
franchise.
most money. Yes. So
no, but for
yes.
But for Lego, where they do like sorry, the Mattel company where they do like Barbie dolls of almost every celebrity.
Yes.
In this case, how are they making money? Because I mean, they're the ones doing the dolls. So what happens if you want to patronize their products, you pay them, or how does it work?
When they sign the agreement with the celebrity, there's an amount they give the celebrity for using their image. Now, after they have given the celebrity this amount, based on their agreements, they are free to use the celebrity's image as they create the doll for a certain number of activities, right?
Okay.
You're good. So they are free to be able to sell a certain number of items as stated in the agreement. So for instance, in the agreement,
using that celebrity, okay.
Good. So they're using the celebrity's face and form to sell a particular doll and perhaps a number of outfits for the doll to change in. So these agreements, most of the time, we are talking about them very casually, but are often ironclad because the celebrity is selling you a portion of their image. So sometimes they agree specifically on what you can and cannot use in their image. For instance, recently, Ariana Grande had an agreement with one of the department stores to manufacture a line of clothing, and the agreement fell through. But the department store went ahead to manufacture clothing that was very similar to clothing that Ariana Grande had worn.
I saw that, and she sued them.
She sued them, thank you, because that was not in the agreement, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So these licensing, yes, Shanice, go ahead.
So here, that means the department store would have made so much money using her image.
Exactly.
Okay. So they, I mean, in essence, so they benefits the most using her image because everybody is attracted to Ariana Grande.
Exactly. But she would also have benefited because she would have also charged a certain amount of money. That. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Doc. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Shanice. Yakubu, please go ahead.
Okay, Doc.
Yes, sir.
So an example of this licensing in the pharmaceutical industry in Ghana here.
Yes, sir.
A lot of drugs manufactured on the other side.
Yes, please.
You see the local manufacturers here manufacturing the similar thing.
Yes, please.
And on their label, they say they state that they've been licensed by the company on the other side.
Yes, please.
And so in that case, do they pay some sort of yearly, what do you call it, compensation to the person giving them the license?
Yes, please. It will depend on the terms of the agreement, whether they agree to an annual payment or a one-off payment.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Like Guinness, because we don't have this formula here, the Guinness Island will be making money to here then.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Elikem Chris, you said Hasbro. Great. Yes, Hasbro is one of the foremost toy manufacturers in the world. And they also license a lot of action figures from the animations that our kids watch. So good one there. Paramount Pictures as well is a licensor for a lot of their productions, including the Transformers. So good examples, Elikem. Abna, please go ahead.
Doc, I wanted to ask a question. Is licensing the same as franchising?
No.
Okay. Can you help me with the difference, if you don't mind?
Very soon, in the subsequent slides, I think in the next 2 slides, we will look at the specific differences between licensing and franchising. So please bear with me for a few moments. We'll get there and then it will all become clear.
Thank you.
You're welcome, my dear. All right. So just like we were discussing in the Ariana Grande example, the main issue that firms will usually face with licensing is the policing of the agreement. Because in the event that the agreement that is signed is not ironclad, the licensee will sometimes veer off what has been agreed upon, and they will start acting contrary to the initial understanding that the licensor had with them. So you realize that sometimes the licensee's operations and quality control will sometimes become circumspect after the agreement has been signed. Meanwhile, that was not in the agreement, right? So one major issue that we need to bear in mind when it comes to licensing is the issue of policing the licensing agreement and seeing to it that it is implemented as it was agreed upon, right? So like we have given several examples. So these are just by the way, right? So Disney, ColourPop, they license the Disney princess characters to ColourPop to manufacture makeup for a particular kind of age group. However, we know that makeup is universal, so you'll see a lot of people patronizing it. And then we can also talk about Hasbro, which Elikem has so conveniently shared with us, who also obtain licenses from companies like Disney to be able to manufacture all the toys and action figures that we see. Then we can also talk about Lego that obtains licenses for a lot of the major motion pictures and animations that we know of, including Friends, Harry Potter, Star Wars, Avengers, you name it, to be able to manufacture and sell Lego. And more recently, Maybelline partnered with, obtained the license of the Marvel characters to be able to create a whole makeup line built around the Marvel universe and the superheroes in that universe. Yeah, Mariaba, even Spider-Man. Okay, so Nigel says, all these Hannah Montana pencils, erasers, and shirts we see around, the producers have a license. Yes, please, Nigel. And I agree, it's quite interesting.
In Ghana here?
The people who bring it to Ghana buy it from people who have the license to manufacture them. So the licenses are not obtained by the people in Ghana here because they are not manufactured here.
But docs, there are some exercise book with the Hannah Montana picture. Those ones, are we sure that they are coming from?
I'm not sure. I queried this some time ago. I remember we had a huge discussion about it.
Printed here. They are not printed here.
Yeah, we had a huge discussion about it.
They are not printed here. They are from China. They are not printed here.
Good. And a friend was saying that in terms of international marketing, technically, once you give the license to the person, you do not control where the person exports it to. So like our colleague was just saying right now, it's manufactured in China and exported here, but they've obtained the license. So the licensor cannot control where they export it to, right? But for those who are in Ghana and are just taking the pictures of the internet and slapping it on the cover of exercise books, the licensors are not coming after these people because I believe it's not worth their buck. If they come and sue an individual in his backyard or in his garage, taking pictures of the internet and putting it on an exercise book, I wonder how much money they will make. But if it is a conglomerate or some giant that has made billions and millions and you are suing them to court, you know there's some huge returns to be made, right? So that is my take on it. Kafui, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Prof, I always like to bring it to the service, the service and not the product.
Yeah.
So let's say a movie. Let's say it's a movie.
Yes.
And a cinema company has a license to show the movie.
Yes, please.
And then the television companies in Ghana or anywhere, they show the movies on TV.
Yes, please.
Does that amount to a violation of the licensing?
It's called piracy.
Yes,
so
it's called
on TV. Usually don't get it from the cinemas who have actually obtained the license to show it.
Okay.
They usually get it from what we refer to as the torrent sites.
Yes. So my question is that it seems that this licensing and everything, it doesn't apply to Africa. It's like we do it with disdain and we get away with it. So it's like,
yeah, like I was saying a few moments ago, they can't be bothered with us.
Okay.
Because when they look at how much, imagine the owner of this movie coming from Hollywood to sue a small TV station that is streaming from, let's say Standard TV. This is to make this away. Coming to sue Standard TV for showing Avengers their station.
Okay. But I'm just thinking something like Silverbird.
Yeah.
They have the license to show some of these movies. So if they see it being shown on a TV station, they can take it up.
Yes, they can.
Can they?
They can't, because they are the people with the license in that context.
Oh, okay.
So they can take action because it is directly affecting their business.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Kafui. Yes, but he said, how much can you make in Africa? My sentiments exactly. Nigel, you said after a while, the movies and series end abruptly because they don't legally have the right. Exactly. Right. So me, I don't even watch series anymore in Ghana here. I can't handle the heartache when we are about to find out the killer and then the series just ends. I want to know who the killer was. I need closure.
Very true.
So that's just by the way, right? So the second type we are going to talk about is franchising. And franchising is a variation of a licensing strategy where the parent company, known as the franchisor, allows the franchisee to operate a business developed by the franchisor. So the business as has been developed, every single thing about the business, in return for a fee and adherence to franchise-wide policies and practices. Now here, because the franchise is mimicking every single thing about the business, from the name of the business to how the business premises is set up, to how staff are dressed, to the way promotional material are designed and distributed, to the way staff are trained and they should be dressed. All of these things have to be policed very closely because they are being replicated exactly as the franchisor designed and envisioned it. So in addition to the fee, the franchisee has to also agree to adhere to the franchise-wide policies and practices to ensure that it stays on brand, such that the Burger King in Ghana should be the same as the Burger King in South Africa and the same as the Burger King in the US. So the franchising is more of a marketing-oriented method of selling a business service, right? Often to small independent investors who have some working capital, but they do not have any experience in terms of doing business. So they need to be able to borrow and mimic the entire business model of a more established investor to be able to get into the business world and stay afloat, right? So there are two main types of franchising we can talk about. The first one is product and trade name franchising, where the franchisees are granted the right to distribute or sell a manufacturer's products within a specified territory or location. So in that case, if you are given the franchise to sell a particular product. You are only given that franchise to operate within, say, Ghana, Togo, and Cote d'Ivoire, and nowhere beyond that, right? And in this case, you have to adhere to it because you are using the manufacturer's trademark, their trade name, or their product line, which you have paid for. And they could have licensed or franchised the same trademark or trade name to another organization within a particular territory. So you have to adhere to the policy such that you do not extend your reach into another franchisee's territory, which could bring about conflict. So for instance, some years back, Coca-Cola Bottling obtained the license to be able to manufacture Schweppes in Ghana from a company known as DNC Company Limited. So whereas there were other Schweppes products being sold on the market, the ones that were actually being manufactured in Ghana for the Ghanaian market were being done by Coca-Cola Bottling Company under license from DNC Company. So that's a typical example of a franchise based on products and trade name. Now, this is less popular, unlike the business format package franchising, which is very popular in Ghana at the moment. Here, the franchisor transfers under contract, or the franchisor transfers under contract the entire business package or the entire business format that it has developed and owns to a host country entity. So the package transferred will usually contain elements necessary to set up the business and run it profitably over a certain period of time. So these will include the trademarks or the names, sometimes including the individual products that are sold at the various premises, as well as the copyrights for each of the names, the designs in terms of the setup of the premises of these organizations, as well as how the kitchens and restaurants are supposed to be set up, particularly when we are dealing with franchises in the food industry, as well as patents, trade secrets, and know-how, right? KFC Ghana has the same secrets that KFC USA uses in frying their chicken, right? So in terms of the franchise that was given to the franchise owner in Ghana to sell KFC, it included not just the name KFC, but all the designs and know-how and patents and how to be able to use the business model as has been developed and designed by the original franchise owner in the Ghanaian market. And that is characteristic of the business format package franchising. And this is all done in exchange for an initial or continuous fee, depending on the terms of the agreement from the onset. So in terms of the differences between licensing and franchising, which Abna was curious about, in terms of licensing and franchising, the term royalties is normally used when we are talking about licensing. However, with franchising, the fee that is charged is referred to as a management fee. And when it comes to licensing, the products or even a single product are the common element that is often involved in a licensing agreement. Whereas with franchising, it involves the entire business, from know-how to goodwill to trademarks and business contacts, as well as intellectual rights. Because the goodwill of KFC USA is what will make KFC's introduction in another foreign market successful, because of the good name. That is what will make it recognizable as a brand to people in those markets. Again, licensing is also usually taken by well-established businesses who often have a strong foothold in the market. We saw from the licensing examples we gave that it was companies like Lego, Hasbro, and Mattel who are engaging in this licensing agreement, and we will all agree that they are well-established businesses. Whereas franchises are usually taken by startup investors who have a huge amount of capital to invest, but do not have the experience to go into business on their own. So they need the entire business model of the franchisor to enable them to enter into business and increase their odds of success, right? Now for licenses, the terms are usually 16 to 20 years long, right? Those are the common lengths for licensing agreements. However, when it comes to franchise agreements, they're normally between 5 years, sometimes extending to at most 11 years. They do not go as long as licensing agreements do, right? Still on the differences between licensing and franchising, licensees tend to be self-selecting in the sense that the licensee decides who they want to get a license from. Whereas with franchising, the franchisee is the one who is selected by the franchisor. So as a franchisee, you can apply to use someone's franchise and you can get turned down because perhaps the franchisor does not like you or did not believe that you are good enough to represent their brand in that foreign market, right? And usually concerns specific existing products with very little benefit from ongoing research when it comes to licensing. So we realize that the licenses that they go in for are usually well-established products that are already existing, that are bestsellers, that people are very comfortable with. In terms of Lego, they go in for very popular Hollywood blockbuster movies, very popular animations that people already know and love, like the Avengers and Harry Potter and Friends, right? Whereas the franchisor is expected to pass on to the franchisee the benefits of ongoing research programs as part of the agreement. So the franchisee is still receiving information from the franchisor after the agreement has been signed, because any change or improvement in the entire business model that happens in the mother company must trickle down and be experienced in all the different franchises, given that they are replicating the business model that is used by the mother company, right? And when it comes to licensing, there is no goodwill attached to the license because it's totally retained by the licensor. So they do not give you everything. They give you the means to use some of it. However, even though the franchisor does retain the main goodwill, the franchisee still picks up an element of localized goodwill because the brand that the franchisor has built is known worldwide. And the franchisee is basically replicating what has already been built and is trusted and is known for a certain level or standard of service, right? So that's another major difference between licensing and franchising. And then finally, licensees enjoy a substantial measure of free negotiation. And this is because bargaining tools they can use include their trade muscle and their established position in the marketplace. Companies like Hasbro and Lego have an established position in the marketplace such that they bring to the negotiation table certain leverages that they come and pitch to the licensor to let the licensor know the opportunity that they will also be gaining by giving them their license to use. Whereas with the franchisee, there's nothing like negotiation. You are coming in for the franchisor's goodwill, for the franchisor's brand in their entire business model. And the franchisor has determined beforehand how much they want to sell it to you and on what terms. So there is no room for negotiation. Please, I hope that makes sense. Yes, Elizabeth.
Yes, please. For the first point, for franchising, you were saying that
on this slide or the previous one?
Yeah, just the slide, the slide.
Okay.
You were saying that sometimes the franchisor can actually turn down the franchisee.
Yes,
could it be because of location?
It could also be because of location.
Okay.
Some franchisors would not want to enter certain markets that are heavily dominated by their competition.
And sometimes too, I think they might have given franchise to another person who is almost closer to that particular location. So
that's
probably they wouldn't want to experience some cannibalism in that
area.
Exactly.
So that's another reason. But it will all depend on the ethos of the franchisor. Because you realize that for certain franchises in certain markets, they are everywhere. In the US, for instance, a franchise like Subway is all over the place in almost every state. Sometimes you can have multiple within a 1 mile stretch. So it all boils down to the franchisor and what they are willing to allow. But like we mentioned just before Elizabeth spoke, there's no room for negotiation when it comes to franchise. Unlike with licensing, where there is some amount of negotiation, and then negotiators have different bargaining tools that they can bring to the table to increase their chances of benefiting more from the licensing agreement. So thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing that with us. So now that we have understood licensing and franchising and the differences between them, let's look at contract manufacturing. So contract manufacturing is where the firm enters the foreign market by contracting firms in the host country to produce all or some portions of their products. So by using contract manufacturing, the firm is able to have foreign sourcing without making a final commitment. All they do is sign an agreement with a local manufacturer to be manufacturing all or part of the products on their behalf. So in that case, the firm that is exporting into the foreign market can focus on developing and controlling the research and development arm of the process, engage in the marketing, distribution, sales, and servicing of the products on international markets, and handing over the responsibility of the production to a local firm within the market. So for instance, when we look at organizations like IKEA relies heavily on a contractual network of small overseas manufacturers. And that is because they like to focus on the other aspects of the value chain, particularly the research and development, and then other downstream activities like marketing, sales, distribution, and servicing. And then allowing the local manufacturing organizations to do the manufacturing of the product. Now, this is a classic tactic by which firms enter markets, especially where these foreign markets have high levels of regulation and tariffs that limits the ability of firms to enter these foreign markets. So by using a local manufacturer, they escape the cost involved in having to manufacture the product in their home country and ship it all the way to the foreign market that they want to enter into and incur all these high tariffs and regulations that are going to influence the sale of the final product in that foreign market, with most of the costs ending up being transferred to the final buyer or consumer. So we realize that a lot of organizations have taken huge advantage of this, particularly one of the most famous tech companies that we know now being Apple. Apple was able to bypass a lot of the regulation and the challenges they would have had selling their products in the Chinese market by using a Chinese manufacturer known as Foxconn China to manufacture their iPhones. Again, in India, a country that is known as the tariff king, with one of the highest level of tariffs in the world ever, according to the World Trade Organization, Apple was also able to bypass their high amount of tariffs and regulation by setting up by using a manufacturing company in India known as Western India to manufacture their iPhones. So contract manufacturing is one of the very common means by which a lot of the more established multinational companies try to bypass adverse macroeconomic environment in various foreign markets to be able to ensure that they can sell their products to buyers in that foreign market. Now, in addition to contract manufacturing, we can also talk about joint ventures, which is another form of contractual mode of entering a foreign market. Now, joint ventures are partnerships between two or more parties, usually organizations based in different countries, by which they come to an understanding on how to be able to manufacture and sell their products and services to consumers in foreign markets. Now, these collaborations can occur in three forms. They can either collaborate on upstream-based activities, which usually involve research and development and the production of the product or service in question. They could also collaborate on downstream-based activities, which involve primarily the marketing, distribution, sales, and after-sales service of the product that they are selling. Whereas others will also collaborate on both upstream and downstream activities by using their competencies in a complementary manner and engaging in those value chain activities that they have distinctive capabilities in and complementing each other along those lines to be able to achieve a certain level of economies of scale when it comes to the manufacture and sale of a particular product in a foreign market. So with joint ventures, there are two main types of joint ventures that I want us to take cognizance of, right? But before we do so, this model basically shows us what we just discussed in terms of the opportunities for collaboration, looking at how they can go about collaborating on either upstream or downstream activities or both, depending on what their distinctive capabilities and resources are. So in terms of the types of joint ventures, the first type of joint venture we can talk about is a contractual non-equity joint venture. So by the name contractual non-equity joint venture, we are referring to the fact that there is no equity involved. And no equity being involved means that there is no joint company that is formed at the end of this contractual agreement. The two or more companies that form the partnership simply share the cost of the investment and the risk involved, as well as the long-term profits. But they do not come together to form a totally new company that is a separate personality from their already existing organizations. So in terms of contractual non-equity joint ventures, there are two main examples I want us to take cognizance of. For instance, in 2018, Samsung and Spotify struck a deal, which is a contractual non-equity joint venture, which meant that Spotify would be made available on Samsung devices. And they also agreed that it would be easier for Samsung users to be able to stream music on Samsung devices. Now, a year later in 2019, based on how well the previous agreement went, they went on to expand the terms of their contractual non-equity joint venture to make it such that Spotify will come pre-installed on Samsung phones. Not all of them, but a particular number and type of Samsung phones. So that whoever buys that type of Samsung phone will receive Spotify on it pre-installed and get 6 months free access to stream all kinds of music on Spotify. Now, I thought this was genius because for a long time, Spotify has been doing its best to outdo its #1 competitor in the market. Who do you think Spotify's #1 competitor in the market is or was?
Apple Music.
I think iTunes.
iTunes, yeah. So Apple Music and iTunes. Now, what did iTunes have going for them that Spotify did not?
They have it.
I think they were already on the Apple phone, on the iPhone already.
Good, right? So Apple devices are all connected to iTunes and Apple Music. So they have the phones, they have the iPods, all of which come pre-installed. So this was a strategic move on the part of Spotify to be able to ensure that they can be able to compete effectively against Apple and their Apple Music or iTunes, which benefited from the iOS devices that they came pre-installed on. Right? So Samsung being the next largest phone manufacturer, apart from Apple, being able to get into contract with Spotify to give them this opportunity is a game changer for Spotify because it puts them in some regards at par with Apple, such that they now have a device that the streaming service will go with. And you can say, how different is the contractual non-equity joint venture from a strategic alliance? Some people use the two of them interchangeably. It depends on the literature that you are reading. Is that okay? Yeah. So some literature will say strategic alliance or a non-equity joint venture. While others will try to use them separately. All right. Let's look at another example. In 2016, Uber and Volvo got into a contractual non-equity joint venture. And the idea was to create a self-driving vehicle. But the gag was that the ratio of ownership will be 50-50, such that Volvo will create the base vehicle, and each of them will autonomously work on developing the self-drive technology. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Because Uber does not have capabilities in doing what?
Producing the car.
In producing the car. Right? So Volvo produced the car, and then they both used Uber's technology as the basis to try and build upon to develop the self-drive that will power the vehicle. Right? And this was estimated to be worth close to $350 million. Right? And to date, they have still not been able to successfully finish manufacturing this self-driving vehicle. They've been creating prototypes and testing it out. I think they're on their third prototype now. Right? But this is a typical example of how, through a contractual non-equity joint venture, another firm that lacks capabilities in an area can benefit from the capabilities of another organization in that area to enter a new market, right? Often in a foreign location. Okay, so that is it for contractual non-equity joint ventures. Now, the next one we are going to talk about are the equity-based joint ventures, which are the direct opposite of the contractual non-equity joint ventures. So the equity-based ones involve the creation of a new separate limited liability company, right? In which foreign and local investors share ownership and control. And even though equity-based joint ventures are not very common currently, a very popular equity-based joint venture that is timeless that we always talk about is the one we refer to as Sony Ericsson, right? Which started in 2001 as a joint venture between Swedish telecom corporation known as Ericsson and then Japanese electronics manufacturer Sony, where they came together to form a new company that was supposed to be solely dedicated to developing cellular devices. And it was such a hit that almost everyone around the world owned a Sony Ericsson phone at one point or the other. Right? So it's one of the very popular equity-based joint ventures. But in recent times, equity-based joint ventures are very few and far between. So these are the two main types of joint ventures that we can talk about, right? And with that, we come to the end of the discussion on the intermediate modes, also referred to as the contractual modes. Tara, please come in.
Okay, so thank you. In one of our prior lectures, we spoke about strategic alliances and JVs.
Yes, please.
Made to understand was that with the strategic alliances, each of the still operated individually, but then they all just worked alongside the additional organizations within the SA. So
which is exactly what the contractual non-equity joint venture is, isn't it?
Equity is, exactly. But then we also went on to discuss that when the companies create a brand new company, that would be like the equity, what you've explained as the equity-based JVs.
Yes.
We called those JVs. So is it safe to say that when people talk about JVs, they are more likely referring to the equity-based JVs rather than the contractual non-equity ones?
Yes.
Or, okay, so it's safe to make that assumption.
But I explain it like this so that you can be able to understand the sub-differences, right?
Okay, okay.
So based on what we've explained now, you've been able to decipher it, isn't it?
Yes, yes. So I just wanted to be sure that there wasn't an additional thing in there that I was missing. And if I could honestly make that distinction and call them, you know, what's an SA or a JV based on what we learned in the other lecture.
Yeah, so when you say JVs, you're talking about both the contractual non-equity ones and the equity-based ones.
Yes.
Good.
But so you have given us more sight, more depth into this. Yes. Based on the other lecture we had, I was under the impression that, you know, we had the SA and then we had the JV, and the JV was only, in my mind at that point, the JV was only the equity-based JV. So at that point, I didn't even know that the SA fell under JVs.
Yes, please.
Generally.
The SA but then is now a type of JV. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Tara. Mamiesi, please go ahead.
Okay. Hello, Doug.
Yes.
I'm sorry to take you back, but please, with franchising, how is the monitoring done? how's the monitoring done with franchising to ensure that policies are adhered to as agreed upon?
Okay, so what I know with the franchising is that the agreements are usually more ironclad and punitive, such that they are more closely monitored, and you are made to commit to a lot of things than in a licensing agreement. And with the franchising for the monitoring, I know that for the franchises in Ghana, for instance, they often have supervisory visits from the mother company. And annually, I think annually or quarterly, there are meetings that are had between the owners of the various franchises and the franchise owners to discuss matters arising. But it all boils down to who the franchisor is and how they want to go about their monitoring. And depending on the franchise you're signing on to, the agreements are totally different. For instance, when you're signing on to get a McDonald's franchise, as part of their franchising agreement, McDonald's has to own the real estate that you are going to use to site your franchise, and you have to rent it from them. Mamiesi, did you get that?
Yes, please.
Good. So if Mamiesi is getting a franchise from McDonald's to set up in Ghana, McDonald's has to buy a building where Mamiesi will set up her McDonald's, and Mamiesi will rent that building from McDonald's.
Okay.
But Burger King doesn't have any such arrangements like that. Burger King doesn't have to own the property where your franchise is sited.
Okay.
So each franchisor has their own terms. You're welcome, Mamiesi. Yakubu, please go ahead.
All right, Doc. Thank you so much for the differentiation.
Yes, sir.
Just like the way Tara put it.
Yes, sir.
So from now on, we should be able to professionally differentiate the joint ventures.
Yes, sir.
And be able to know that the strategic alliance is a non-equity type.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Tara, thank you.
Prof.
Yes, Kafui.
I was just wondering that KFC, do they have a franchise? Because I see the difference in foods, like KFC sells rice, jollof.
Great.
Whilst in Ghana, it doesn't.
Great.
And when I think
in
about
Ghana, they tried selling the jollof, but it didn't work.
Yes.
So they recalled.
Yes. Okay. So when I think about Steers, the company the South African company that failed in Ghana, then I can say that it is because of franchising that it failed. That the company was
It wasn't because of franchising. Should I tell you why Steers failed? They failed because of something we are going to discuss in one of our next sessions called strategic adaptation.
Okay. I was thinking that because they were not susceptible to change.
Good.
To change
so they decided
menu.
to use the standardization approach. So Steers, as is in South Africa, was wholly brought to Ghana. I can still taste that they are horrible tasting sauce. Do you remember that? Purple or pink or whatever. It was so bad. And like you are saying, they didn't want to change anything.
Yeah. But so they had some good ice creams.
And the toys, I like their toys. The toys that came with the kids.
Yeah.
Like the toys, but the sauce was bad. Thank you, Kafui.
You can't eat it. Okay.
All right. Okay. So let's move on to the hierarchical modes. And this is the highest form of control, right? With the highest amount of what? Is it the highest amount of flexibility? But it also has the highest amount of risk. And that is because, like we mentioned, the firm goes all in with this one. They completely own and control all the foreign entry modes, right? And the degree of control between the head office and the subsidiaries is usually dependent upon which of the value chain activities are being transferred to the foreign market. So, Yakubu, please, your hand is still up. Is it from the previous one or it's a new one?
Yes, the previous one, sorry.
Okay, all right, sir. So in that case, the firm is deciding to retain ownership of all the modes of entering into the foreign market. And depending on how much of the value chain activities are performed in the subsidiary, they will decide how much control they will give the management of the subsidiary over activities in that particular foreign market where the subsidiary is located. So when it comes to hierarchical modes, there are two main modes we can talk about. The first one is the merger or acquisition. Now, with a merger or acquisition, it usually happens when a domestic company selects a foreign company and acquires its ownership and control to be able to set up shop in that foreign market. And this provides immediate access to this particular domestic manufacturing company, to the facilities and the marketing network of this company in the foreign market that they are acquiring. So in terms of mergers, it's about combining the two companies. So one does not necessarily acquire ownership and complete operation of the other one on an outright basis. It generally happens by offering the stockholders of one company securities in the acquiring company, so that they will surrender some of their stock, and then the companies will end up becoming one company sharing ownership in this foreign market. And there have been so many of these in Ghana that we have observed, including when Airtel and Millicom's Tigo combined to become Airtel Tigo, which is now government owned. And then we also saw it when FNB took over Ghana Home Loans Bank, right? And then we also saw it when Total and Mobile merged. So these are all examples of mergers that have taken place, which have aided the entry of various organizations into foreign markets, particularly into Ghana, right? Now for acquisition, the company completely takes over the other company in the foreign market. So it's not about giving up some stock in their domestic company to be able to get some stock in the company in the foreign market they're trying to enter into. The home organization completely buys out the entire stock and ownership of the other company in the foreign market and becomes the new owner. And in that case, it's an acquisition. So it's like the way ABSA bought Barclays and changed everything. They became the new owners. It's also the same thing that happened when MTN came to Ghana and bought Space Phone Ariba at that time, right? And then Tata also very reclusively bought Jaguar and bought Land Rover. Today, there are still people who don't know that Land Rover and Range Rover are owned by Tata Motors. Is there anyone here who didn't know?
I didn't.
Okay, so Tata owns Range Rover. They own Land Rover and they own Jaguar as well.
Tata, I don't believe this. I don't know.
But Doc,
yeah,
I think
because
Tata
uses
is actually a conglomerate now.
Yes, Tata is not a conglomerate. Tata that people didn't respect.
Yes, I was just going to add that a lot of people who would want to ride a Land Rover would not want to be seen in a Tata. So the irony of it, imagine that.
Tata owns Land Rover. Tata owns Land Rover and Jaguar. Right, but that was Tata's smart move of breaking into foreign markets, because like you said, people didn't even want to be seen near the Tata. Right, so it was acquisition that gave them their big break.
Tata Mahindra.
Thank you, Tata Mahindra. They gave it to the Ghana Prison Service. I remember the car was always breaking down. Oh. Okay, so that is it for acquisitions, right? And then the next one we can talk about is the greenfield strategy, which, Tara, is where Volkswagen Ghana comes in. So greenfield is the process of expanding operations in a foreign market from ground zero. So they'll purchase a local property, hire local manpower, right? Set up their own factory and then manufacture for sale in the foreign market. And here, because they are doing everything themselves, there's no risk of losing their technical competence to a competitor. And they can also keep a tight control on their operations, such that it will not stray from what the home company or the headquarters has been known for and has established itself for in foreign markets all over the world. So apart from Volkswagen in Ghana that we know of, Mercedes-Benz also has a production facility in Pune, India, where they manufacture Mercedes-Benz vehicles just like the ones that are manufactured in Germany. Samsung also has a manufacturing facility in India where they manufacture a lot of the Samsung phones that are bought, and no one can even tell that they were manufactured in India. right? And this is a direct reflection of the greenfield strategy where the firm decides to set up shop from ground up. And that is for the hierarchical modes. So thus far, we have gone through all the 3 types of modes along the continuum we talked about, from the export mode to the intermediate or contractual modes, and then the hierarchical modes, right? Now, in the event that the firm chooses any of these modes, there are certain rules that we can see them adhering to. And we refer to them as the entry mode selection rules, and there are 3 of them. The first one we can talk about is the naive rule. And here with the naive rule, we are talking about the fact that the firm, being the decision maker, uses the same entry mode for all foreign markets, ignoring the heterogeneity of the individual foreign markets, which is what happened to, Kafi, are you there? So we can say Steers was using which rule?
The naive rule.
The naive rule. They don't care about our local tastes and preferences. It's the same thing for every market, right? Whereas with the pragmatic rule, the decision maker here being the firm uses a workable entry mode for each foreign market, typically starting with a low risk entry mode. So it is only when a particular mode does not work that they would try out an alternative approach, hence the word pragmatic. So like the KFC example, we realized that they came in with the usual KFC menu. People liked it. Then they tried to adhere to the Ghanaian taste by introducing some of the things that we like the jollof rice. Do you remember the KFC shito?
I remember it, but
yeah, that one tasted very bad.
It was. With the jollof. I wonder what very terrible combination.
And then themselves realized it was not working, so they quickly backtracked, right? So in this case, we are noting that not all the potential alternatives will be investigated, right? So they'll first start with the workable entry mode, which, as we have observed from the KFC example, may not be the best. But because it's a pragmatic rule that they are using, the moment they observe that things are not going well, they can quickly just backtrack and then change things around until they are able to find the best mode that fits that market, and they will stick to it. Now, beyond these 2, there's a third and final rule called the strategy rule. Tara, please come in.
Okay, so would you say that the naive rule is used more when a company decides to use the standardization versus adaptation, or not always?
Yes.
Okay.
It is only a naive organization in this era of globalization that will ignore the effects of adaptation versus standardization. So Tara, you're spot on. Jemima, please come in.
Yeah, I think Tara said it all.
Yes, please.
Because that was the same question I was going to ask.
Okay.
Because I'm looking at it from this angle where they have their recipes as a secret.
Yes.
And they want to penetrate into our market to imitate what we have.
Yeah.
Okay. And at the end of the day, it doesn't work. Why wouldn't they employ somebody who knows how to do the shito and the jollof?
Yeah.
But then they wanted to try their hands on it and see if it works. I mean, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to do it, you don't do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Joemma. Oh, thank you, David. All right. So based on that, the strategic rule is the third and final rule we can talk about in terms of how firms apply the various entry modes we have talked about. And with the strategic rule, the firm, like the name says, applies a strategic approach to selecting their choice of entry. So here they will look at all the alternate modes that they can use to possibly enter the market. And then they will systematically compare and evaluate each of them before making a choice. So in their systematic evaluation, they would look at everything from the availability of company resources, which we talked about when we talked about the firm's internal situation, as well as the level of risk involved with selecting a particular entry mode over the other, as well as other objectives they may have apart from making profit, in addition to the micro and macro environmental factors we talked about in the external environment. So all these things are going to come together to help them to decide the mode that will best maximize the profit contribution to their bottom line. At the same time, taking cognizance of their resources, their core competencies, the risk involved, environmental factors, as well as other objectives that they have beside profit. So at any point in time, in the selection of any of these modes that we are talking about, we can clearly see that a firm will be applying either one of these three rules in their approach towards deciding how they are going to enter a particular market and which approach they are going to use to do so. And with that, we've come to the end of today's session.